Hi, I'm Irene Tansman, author of A.B. and Arlene's Autism War. If you have a loved one enrolled in a dehabilitation facility in Massachusetts, or you are considering dehabilitation for your loved one with autism and/or intellectual disability, or you yourself are attending a dehabilitation facility, please consider joining the Dehabilitation Families in Massachusetts Facebook group. Today, I have a special guest on my channel, Jonathan Mitchell. He is a self-advocate, and he's the author of the Rhythm Bluff. We're going to talk to Jonathan today about the Bettelheim years. These are the years when some professionals believed that autism was caused by poor mothering, poor parenting, et cetera, et cetera. Jonathan lived through these times. I know it's been a long time, but we want to see if we can gain some insight as to what it was like during those times. Jonathan, welcome to my channel, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a man in my 60s with mild autism, and I've been, through a variety of therapies, like psychoanalysis being the early one from like the late 50s to the late 60s. Started before I was 3 years old, and I used to write a blog, Autism's Gadfly, about autism issues, and as Irene previously mentioned, I've written a novel called The Rhythm Bluff.
Could you talk a little bit about what the Rhythm Bluff is about?
Yeah, it's about an autistic person, who undergoes, an experimental, brain treatment to help his autism, but instead it turns him into an expert poker player.
I read the book cover to cover, and I did enjoy it, even though I know absolutely nothing about poker. I've never ever played poker, but the book is still enjoyable, even if you you're like me and you don't know anything about poker. But I want to dive right in right now and ask you what you remember about that time during the Bettelheim years when some professionals believed that that poor mothering caused autism. Do you have any memories about that time, what it was like, what kind of treatments they gave you, things like that?
Sure. It's not really vivid, but I do remember I had to go to a psychoanalysis, between 2 and 4 times a week. It became 4 times a week as I got to be an older child, like 9 or 10 years old. I started with her before I was 3, and I had to, talk about, my dreams, and she would interpret my dreams, and I would make slips of the tongue, and she would say, that was deliberate, like you've heard the expression, Freudian slip. And I also had to go for tutoring at this place, Frostig School, to help my fine motor coordination problems, because their method was supposed to be like really great. It was like considered like the greatest thing since sliced bread in the 60s, but it didn't really help my fine motor coordination. I doubt it helped anybody like with reading disabilities. And also my mother underwent psychoanalysis, though not quite as long as I did, because she was told I would never recover unless she herself underwent psychoanalysis to find out like what the problem was that she had, that she obviously gave to me, since I saw a neurologist. I guess as soon as my parents discovered I was nonverbal or close to nonverbal, shortly before I was 3 years old, they took me to a neurologist at UCLA, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. And in 1958, hardly anyone had heard of autism or anything like that. So they concluded I had some sort of emotional problem, and my mother underwent psychoanalysis as well, and she talked, about castration anxiety. Well, she didn't say it like that, but where she said that, I was traumatized because I had a sister that was born, 3 years younger, born shortly after I, like developed these problems, and that I must have seen my sister, naked, and noted, that she didn't have a penis, and that I thought that they had cut hers off, that my father, would cut mine off to
It's
punish
so
me for wanting to
ridiculous.
mate with my mother. And
It's so ridiculous to think that people believe that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Did you gain anything from the treatment that you received? Anything at all? Was anything
Well,
valuable?
not so much from the psychoanalysis. I saw another therapist later who pointed out that my subpar score on the comprehension part of the Wechsler IQ test indicated I had poor social judgment, and that's what got me into trouble with people and why people didn't want to be around me. So it made me, try to improve that a little bit, but that was just something modest. Other than that, it didn't, really help so much.
Well, I think that some of our viewers, most of my viewers, and my channel is not a big channel. We only have, like 60 subscribers. But most of the people viewing are going to be parents of children and adults who have been diagnosed with autism. And they're going to look at you and they're going to say, look, Jonathan is a guy who wrote a book, wrote a blog, tweets, is articulate, and seems very intelligent. And they're going to really want that for their own kid. They're going to see this video. They go, yeah, that's what I want. Is there, what do you think worked for you? What do you think that this just happened?
Well, I'm not sure anything really works for me. And in terms of, what other people might want, for their kids, assuming, they thought that I was some sort of role model that could be emulated, that even assuming that were true, and I'm not sure it is, there's nothing that I don't think can really be done for them, like assuming they're like severely autistic, like minimal verbal or nonverbal, there's, some people recover, some people don't, and I don't think anybody knows exactly why. And and there's probably not a whole lot that can be done. At least that's my opinion.
Let's get back a little bit back to Bettelheim.
Okay.
Now, I have a special interest in the subject of the Bettelheim years and the poor mothering theory. As you know, I wrote a novel about how the poor mothering theory affected one young couple. It hasn't been.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it hasn't been published. I hope someday it will be published, but it hasn't been published yet. So what prompted me to write that book was one of my favorite authors, Joseph Telushkin, who writes about Jewish ethics. And he is a wonderful writer and a wonderful author, a wonderful teacher. I was devastated when I read in one of his books, he quoted Bettelheim, and I do think that he's a good person to read his books. I think everybody should read his books. But he quoted Bettelheim, and I was devastated because that meant he didn't know, the horrible things that Bettelheim did to families, like what you just described. And he, his literary agent, his publisher, and all just went through. Do you think that this history is important for everybody to know? And why do you think it's important? What are the takeaways from this history?
Well, yes, I do, as a matter of fact, and the reason is because mother bashing has never gone away. It still seems like it's as prevalent in the 2020s as it was in the 1960s, but now it's like the neurodiversity movement doing it in others, so the Bettelheim era may be partially dead, but not completely dead. People are still, blaming, mothers for things like Julia Bascom, who's the president of ASAN, says the reason that like a child with an IQ of 40, can't speak or write or blog as well as she can is because, their parents, sheltered them and infantilized them and didn't give them, the proper accommodations, whatever those are, so we can, look at that era and say, well, it's still going on today. And I'm not sure what else I can say about that, but yeah, I feel it's relevant to, to today, even, 60 years later.
I think it's relevant, and that's why I wrote my novel. I'm hoping that I could popularize these thoughts, but the thoughts that mothers were blamed for things that they had nothing to do with. So and these were terrible times to live through. I actually did not. By the time my son was diagnosed, the folks who diagnosed him, the neurologists and etc., they made it very clear to me that there's nothing I could have done to have caused my son's autism. But since then, online and stuff, I have been blamed for all kinds of things. I don't pay much attention to it. I have been, there's a lot of blame out there, undeserved, I think. Yeah.
Your sound is going out for some reason. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you.
Oh yeah, now I can hear you. Your sound went out briefly, so.
Oh, okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the Bettelheim years?
Well, just, like there are certain problems that cause, because my mother, had to have her dreams interpreted, and, she was, like dreamed about looking for something and was like frustrated looking at something. And I guess her analyst said, she was looking for the penis, she never had. And also another thing I remember is that,
it's so absurd.
Both my mother and I were in an analysis, they were deducting that as medical expenses. They were audited by the IRS. I'm not sure what else I have to add. So
they paid privately for this.
Yeah, they didn't have, like, if you're thinking of like IDEA or other things, there was nothing like that in the 60s. People just, paid for, things privately, or
right.
Or I guess in some cases private insurance might have taken it over, but you didn't have, like school districts, subsidizing, these things in the 60s.
Now, the school that Bettelheim was the director of, they have since changed the name of the school, and they're not doing some of the things that they did during the Bettelheim years. It looks to me like the school has changed, but they have prominently displayed on their website Bettelheim like he's some kind of a hero.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that. What do you think
no,
about
I didn't. I just remember it was the orthogenic school in Chicago. I had no idea, that they had, changed their name. I was in Los Angeles. I never went there, and I never met Bettelheim, so I don't know a whole lot about that. But
right, but he had a huge influence over.
Yes, I know about that.
Right.
Your sound's going out again.
Oh, is there
now,
any?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Is there any advice that you would give to our viewers who might be parents of children or adults with autism?
None that I can really think of. I mean, all you can do is make the best of autism and help your kids, be what they can be. But the sad truth is the prognosis for most autistic people is not good.
So do you have any works that are something that you're currently working on, a book or?
Yeah, I'm working on a novel, called Gamma Gets Girls. So I've written, rough drafts of it, and it's not exactly a sequel to the Moo Rhythm Bluff, but it's sort of like a follow-up to the Moo Rhythm Bluff, where the same neuroscientist, tries, with another experiment to help some autistic people, and also there's a schizophrenic person in the mix. But I don't plan on self-publishing it, though I won't take that off the table, but I don't anticipate it'll ever be published.
Publishing is really, really difficult.
Yes, it sure is.
I want to thank you so much for coming onto my channel and for all the information you shared with me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I hope you'll come back again and do another interview with me.
Sure, I'd like to see this one on YouTube first, though.
Oh yes, you will.
And then
All right,
after that, I guess you can email me and let me know if you have any other questions for me and want to do another interview.
Okay, everybody. Jonathan Mitchell, the author, a self-advocate and author of the Moo Rhythm Bluff.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.